right, when you picture the absolute origins of modern sports clubs, you probably imagine, aristocratic gentlemen on pristine lawns, prestigious boarding schools, and wealthy elites basically structuring the games we all love, right? But actually, scratch that. What if I told you the real pioneers were actually out there dodging horse carriages and factory smog? The dominant narrative of sports history is missing a massive, vital piece of the puzzle. So in this explainer, we are going to reclaim that narrative. We're going to uncover the hidden history of urban sports clubs. We'll look at the marginalized communities, the working class, immigrants, women, and minorities who didn't just passively participate in sports. No, through sheer ingenuity and total necessity, they forged the very foundations of the modern games we watch and play today. Here's our agenda for today. Number 1, rethinking sports history. 2, tools to understand agency. 3, the urban sporting crucible. 4, champions of the margins. And finally, 5, more than just play. Let's get right into it. Section 1, rethinking sports history. Beyond the aristocratic myth. Okay, let's dive into this. We've all been sold this dominant narrative that sports were just handed down by wealthy elites from their private gated clubs. But that singular perspective completely obscures an incredibly vibrant hidden reality. Because while the elite were playing in private, working-class folks, immigrants, and minorities were building parallel sporting worlds from the ground up. I mean, these groups were historically locked out of mainstream institutions simply because of their bank accounts, their race, or where they were born. They didn't just copy the wealthy. They actively shaped the sporting tapestry through incredible grassroots ingenuity, creating clubs as innovative, direct responses to their own specific cultural and economic challenges. Section 2, tools to understand agency. Demystifying the academic frameworks. To truly grasp how these communities built their own leagues, we need a toolkit. First up is social capital. This is basically the networks of relationships, trust, and mutual support that enable a community to function effectively. Think of it like a giant network of trust. For a working-class team, a sports club wasn't just about blowing off steam on a Saturday. It was a deliberate strategy. The camaraderie built on a muddy makeshift field translated directly into a vital safety net. Your teammates were literally the people who helped you find a job at the local factory, or the ones who passed a hat around to pool money when someone got sick. They were building their own survival networks, entirely disguised as sports teams. And that brings us to critical race theory, or CRT. In plain English, this posits that racism is a systemic phenomenon embedded in institutions, making alternative spaces acts of resistance. It highlights that the exclusion of racial minorities from mainstream sports wasn't some accident, it was systemic. The doors were locked on purpose. So creating a neighborhood club became this profound act of defiance and self-determination. These grassroots clubs provided safe alternative spaces where people could play without facing discrimination, celebrate their own cultural practices openly, and really build immense collective pride. Finally, we have intersectionality, which looks at how overlapping social identities like race, class, and gender create entirely unique experiences of discrimination and privilege. Kimberly Crenshaw's framework reminds us that a Black working-class immigrant woman faced vastly different hurdles in organizing a team than a white middle-class man. These marginalized founders weren't just one big monolithic group. They were navigating incredibly complex, overlapping realities, and their sporting initiatives emerged in brilliantly nuanced ways to address those exact realities. Section 3, the urban sporting crucible, the historical conditions for innovation. Let's walk through the timeline because it really acted like a pressure cooker. Back in the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution drove massive migrations into crowded, grueling cities. Soon after, waves of immigration created tightly knit ethnic enclaves. And by the 1900s, mainstream sporting clubs, with their high membership fees and strict social codes, just completely locked their doors to these new working classes. So, what did they do? By the 1920s, lacking manicured land and financial capital, they turned public parks, vacant dirt lots, and local pubs into their stadiums and boardrooms. The sheer lack of resources forced this ad hoc grassroots approach. That struggle for space in these expanding urban crucibles was literally the spark that birthed modern alternative sporting institutions. Section 4, Champions of the Margins, Case Studies of Grassroots Ingenuity. Now, what's really interesting about this next section is looking at the actual receipts. Take working-class football, for example. Born from industrial cities, organized in local pubs, and played on makeshift, vacant lot pitches. Picture this. You've got miners covered in soot, having just finished a brutal 12-hour shift, stepping right onto a makeshift dirt pitch to play.
No wealthy benefactors in sight. Local pubs served as their headquarters. Teams were funded by spare pennies collected in jars, built entirely on volunteer effort and an unbelievable amount of collective grit. And as this quote highlights, they provided a constant stream of talent, democratizing the sport, making it accessible and relatable to a broader segment of the population. These working-class pioneers didn't just play the game, they democratized it. They introduced a rugged, determined playing style that literally changed how the game was played. By creating these fierce local rivalries, they built the absolute bedrock of football's massive global popularity today. Then you've got immigrant associations. As Irish, Italian, and Polish immigrants arrived in these overwhelming new urban centers, they faced massive cultural and integration barriers. To survive, they pooled resources to create sports clubs based on shared national origin and language. They basically forged a home away from home that helped them negotiate the challenges of a new society, integrating into their new cities without ever sacrificing their roots. They acted as sites of hybridity, where elements of the homeland could be reinterpreted and adapted within the new context, fostering a unique cultural expression. Think about that. These clubs were cultural melting pots. They mixed the traditions of the old world with the realities of the new, actually introducing totally new variations of sports. And more importantly, if you were a new arrival, that local pitch was exactly where you found out about jobs, housing, and social support. And we absolutely cannot ignore the fierce organizing of early women's sports clubs. Systematically shut out of organized sport in a heavily male-dominated arena, women self-organized. Out of necessity, they ran endless fundraisers, pooled whatever resources they could find, and fiercely lobbied local governments for access to basic facilities. Their organizational structure was highly inclusive, directly challenging those rigid patriarchal norms of the era that insisted public recreation was only a man's domain. They challenged prevailing notions about women's physical capabilities, laying the groundwork for future generations of female athletes. By simply stepping onto the field, they actively shattered the myths about what women could physically do. These early clubs weren't just about fitness, they were a real game changer. They were transformative engines for equality, providing stress relief, practical leadership skills, and a way to assert their undeniable right to occupy public space. Now, this historical thread continues directly into the present day through urban youth initiatives. In under-resourced neighborhoods right now, community leaders, educators, and former athletes are carrying the torch. They form these agile, volunteer-led youth programs using donated gear, adapting games for concrete courts or small gymnasiums. They are creating safe recreational spaces for kids where there otherwise would be absolutely none. As it says here, for many young people, these initiatives are a pathway to higher education, scholarships, and a brighter future, a tool for social mobility. These youth initiatives are building massive social capital today. Exactly like the clubs of the 1800s, they provide a vital alternative to the streets, teaching incredible life skills like resilience and teamwork. Sport is still this powerful, transformative tool for marginalized youth. Section 5. More than just play. The philosophy of resistance and belonging. So what does this all mean? The core takeaway is this. The formation of these clubs fulfilled a deep, fundamental human need for belonging in a society that often pushed these exact groups to the sidelines. Carving out a space to play was a brilliant act of resistance. It proves that sport isn't just some natural pastime handed down from above. It's totally a social construct. It's an arena where marginalized voices successfully claimed the right to play for their own community survival, highlighting the ethics of inclusion and cultural preservation. So I'm going to leave you with a question to chew on. How does acknowledging these marginalized founders fundamentally change the way you view the sports we love today? The history of these games isn't just some neat, tidy tale of aristocrats and gentlemen. No way. It is a complex, beautiful tapestry, and the very fabric of it was woven by the working class, immigrants, women, and minorities who built clubs out of nothing but necessity, grit, and a desire to belong. Definitely keep that in mind next time you watch a game. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.